The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
The best ideas are free with Ben Young from Bwaggy.com.
BWAGY.com. Ben Young is back. G'day there, Ben.
Good morning.
Good weekend?
Very good.
Good.
Very good.
Sifting through music, I hear.
Yeah. We've been picking tracks for the wedding, so listening to hundreds of tracks.
Literally hundreds?
Yeah. Clearly skipping quite a lot.
Right.
But then narrowing it down and re-listening to them all again, and then having to take time out because it's too much music.
And having to agree on the same music as well.
Yeah. Well, we kind of narrow it down to a list, and then we kind of go, definitely not, definitely.
Yeah.
So
good.
We're getting there.
Well, today we're talking about something called the Flynn effect.
Yes. So the Flynn effect is basically answering the question, are we really getting smarter? How often do you hear someone, well, especially either our parents or our grandparents, saying, well, you guys are much smarter than we were at your age?
Yeah.
And this popped to the top of my mind when someone was saying, gee, marketers are much smarter these days. And I was like, okay, maybe. If we look at the Flynn effect, what the Flynn effect...
Who's Flynn, by the way? Do we know?
Must be the name of the researcher.
Yeah.
That's Flynn for those of you looking it up right now.
Yeah.
But the Flynn effect describes what happens to IQ tests. Every 10 to 20 years they refresh it, and what they do is they get normalised scores,
Yeah.
and they compare them. And what has happened is that when you score 100 in an IQ test, that's the median score. Mm-hmm. So they need to keep decreasing it because it keeps increasing.
We keep on getting more intelligent.
So if we took the test that they did 20 years ago, our IQ would be 10 to 20 points higher.
Off the scale.
Yeah, it would be off the scale. So there's this interesting...
is that true?
Yeah. So there's this interesting behaviour.
Is that our education system?
There's so many variables
Okay, right.
tying into that. But basically it means each generation we're getting 10 to 20 points higher based on the IQ scoring system. Yeah. And it's quite interesting if you look at anthropology and the tipping point of civilization. The tipping point there was once our diet had changed enough that our parents could live long enough to be grandparents to our kids. And then they could spend the day imparting knowledge to them. And that's when civilization rapidly came about, because suddenly there was this whole new raft of learning from generation to generation that was built upon.
Yeah.
So that kind of underpins all of this, that each and every new generation absorbs almost the platform of knowledge that the previous generation had, and a little bit more.
Okay, yeah.
Which is quite fascinating, really, in terms of, are we actually really getting smarter, or is this just, okay, each and every generation we're absorbing a new platform of knowledge?
Because often you do hear people saying, oh, the kids these days so smart.
Yeah.
And is that actually true? They're absorbing previous information and taking in new.
Well, that's the thing. When you make a statement like that, you're comparing against yourself.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. If you've imparted most of the stuff you think you should have learnt well before that age, well, they should be smarter, ideally.
But see, I'm of a generation where it's sort of in between. I'm not old enough to say, oh, those kids are so smart.
Yeah.
I'm more like those snotty-nosed little shits. I'm smarter than them.
It's not fair to compare yourself against a 7-year-old.
This is true.
There's a TV show for that.
Indeed. So the whole thing is called the Flynn effect.
Yeah, so the Flynn effect. It's just an interesting thing to think about. And also the other question is, will it stop happening someday? Is there a point where we will stop being able to absorb the previous generation's knowledge and it kind of peters off a bit? Hey,
I doubt it, though, because we're only using some tiny percentage of our brain power at the moment.
Yeah,
right?
So there's a lot to go.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. There's a new mathematical theory going around that using robots and algorithms, we're going to be able to see the results of two things happening, so we can see the end result. Let's say a car crashes into a house. We can see the result, but we're not going to be able to figure out what causes that at a mathematical and a scientific level. So we're starting to see stuff that computers can isolate. If we do A and B, we get C, but we're not sure why we get C. And so we're starting to enter a phase of science where we can't actually understand what is happening because it's too much for us to comprehend.
Do you sometimes wish you weren't born now, that you were born in the future?
I think people have been saying that for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Because, again, that statement is based on the past. How would we be having this conversation 100 years ago? Or 200 years ago?
We could be having this conversation far more intelligently in 100 years' time.
That is true. Time
It'd
machine, please.
could be called the Young Effect.
The Young Effect.
Who knows? Hey, thanks very much, Ben. People can continue this conversation over at the blog, bwaggy.com, bwaggy.com, and also twitter.com/bwaggy. See you next week.
Cheers.
22 minutes past 9.
Kiwi.
And we literally have a bird's eye view, and you realise standing here that